The storm came faster than anyone could have predicted. One moment, the stars stretched out across the sky like scattered silver dust, and the next, the entire dropship was spinning out of control through a swirl of blinding electric clouds. Ryan had been strapped in when it happened, gripping the armrests of his seat, heart hammering as the alarms screamed around him. The ship shuddered with each blast of ion energy, its systems failing one by one until there was nothing left to guide it but gravity and luck. When he finally woke up, everything was silent. The cold hit him first, creeping through the seams of his suit like icy fingers. The inside of the ship was torn apart, lights flickering weakly overhead. A beam had fallen across one corner, sparking. Now and then, and smoke drifted from the broken engine core. Ryan pushed himself up, every muscle aching. He called out once, then again, but there was no answer. The others were gone. Either dead or lost somewhere in the white wasteland beyond. He climbed out of the wreckage and stared at the landscape. Endless snow and ice stretched in every direction, a pale frozen desert under a sunless gray sky. The cold was worse out here. The wind howled across the plains, tugging at his clothes, biting through to his skin. He checked the supply pod, salvaged. What he could: rations, a thermal unit, a damaged scanner, and a single sleeping bag. One sleeping bag on a planet where night temperatures dropped low enough to freeze fuel lines. Great dot with no shelter nearby. Ryan dragged himself toward a jagged ridge in the distance, hoping to find cover. It took hours. His legs grew numb. The wind never stopped screaming. Just when he thought he might collapse, he spotted something twisted metal sticking out of the snow. Another crash site. But this one wasn't human. The wreck was alien, unfamiliar, its hull dark and smooth like obsidian carved by fire. Strange markings lined its surface, glowing faintly under the frost. As he moved closer, he saw the cockpit had cracked open. Inside, a figure stirred. She was not human. Humanoid, yes, tall and lean, with skin like silver ash and long dark braids tied in a pattern around her neck and shoulders. Her eyes snapped open as he approached, glowing faintly blue. One of her arms was pinned beneath a broken panel. She stared at him without speaking. Ryan hesitated. He wasn't sure if she understood him, but he reached forward and pulled the debris off her arm. She winced but didn't cry out. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two strangers stranded on the same frozen moon. He didn't know her name, didn't know her language, but survival didn't wait for introductions. He motioned for her to follow, and to his surprise, she did. They moved together, side by side, through the snow until they reached the cave Ryan had seen earlier near the ridge. It wasn't much, just a crack in the rock, but it was dry inside and shielded from the wind. He started setting up the heat unit while she examined the walls, touching them as if scanning for danger. When she turned back, her face was expressionless. He unrolled the sleeping bag and laid it out near the warmth. Then he opened his rations and offered her one of the protein packs. She took it slowly, her movements precise. They sat in silence, chewing cold food, the only sound the hum of the thermal unit and the faint whine of the wind outside. Night came quickly. The temperature dropped even faster. Ryan zipped up his jacket and looked at her. She was sitting against the wall, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched. Her eyes flicked to the sleeping bag and then back to him. She said the words slowly, like they cost something to speak. Her voice was low and clear, shaped strangely by her accent. "There's only one sleeping bag, human." He looked at her, not sure if it was a statement or a challenge. He nodded slowly and patted the edge of the bag. "I know," he said. They didn't move for a long moment. The air inside the cave grew colder. Frost began to form on the inside of the walls. She narrowed her eyes, then stood up and walked over. Her movements were graceful, controlled. She knelt beside him and paused again, clearly uncomfortable. He lay back, pulling the bag open wider. Just warmth, he muttered. She didn't reply. She slid in carefully beside him, facing away, stiff as stone. Ryan tried to ignore the awkwardness, focusing on the heat building between them. Her body was cold at first, like marble, but slowly the space inside the bag warmed. Neither of them slept easily. Every shift brought accidental touches. He could feel the tension in her body every time their legs brushed, or when their shoulders pressed together. At one point she turned toward him slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her face, eyes open, watching the dark ceiling, lips tight. She whispered something then. He didn't understand it, but it sounded more like a thought than a statement, like she wasn't even speaking to him. He wanted to say something, to ask who she was, what her people thought of Earth, or why she had crashed here too. But exhaustion was pulling him under, and the heat was finally enough to make his eyelids heavy. As sleep crept over him, he heard her whisper again, just one word this time, strange. And then silence. The night passed slowly with the cave walls cracking under the cold and the stars unseen behind a thick blanket of clouds. Somewhere out in the distance, something moved across the ice, unseen but loud. Ryan slept barely, and beside him, the alien warrior stayed awake for hours, staring at the dark with thoughts she didn't yet understand. Something had changed, and things were only just beginning to get complicated. That morning came without sunlight, only a soft gray hue filtering through the icy clouds and painting the cave walls in pale silver. Ryan woke first groggy and cold, but still alive. Warmth still clung to the air around him, not from the thermal unit alone, but from the presence beside him. He turned his head, slightly trying not to startle her. The alien warrior was still there, unmoving, eyes shut but not asleep. Her breathing was slow and even, but her muscles were tense like she had not relaxed all night. He stayed still, not wanting to break. The moment something unspoken had settled between them during the night. Maybe it was trust, or maybe it was just survival, but it was there, like a thin thread connecting two lives thrown together by the universe. She finally opened her eyes and met his gaze without a word. She sat up and pulled herself free from the sleeping bag, her face unreadable again. She stretched her limbs carefully. One arm still stiff from the injury, but clearly healing. Ryan sat up too, rubbing his hands together for warmth and wondering if she had slept at all. She stood at the entrance of the cave, scanning the snowy plains with her strange eyes. He followed her glance but saw nothing, just white, endless and cold. He walked up beside her and pointed to the north ridge, where he had seen a faint signal spike on his damaged scanner the night before. She didn't react immediately, then gave a slow nod, her way of agreeing. Maybe. They moved together again, this time more in sync, not quite partners, not quite strangers, but something in between. The silence between them was no longer tense, it was calm, focused, a kind of shared mission, unspoken but real. They walked across the frozen land, careful to avoid weak patches of ice and open crevices. The wind picked up, slicing across their faces with invisible knives. They lowered their heads and pressed on until they reached a sharp dip in the terrain. Like a crater half swallowed by snow, at the bottom of the crater was the source of the signal, a small black device partially buried in frost. Blinking slowly with a red light, Ryan brushed off the ice, revealing alien writing. He looked at her, questioning. She knelt down beside the beacon and examined it carefully. Her fingers hovered over the surface as she muttered a phrase in her language. He waited, then she turned and spoke in broken translation. Trap, or help, not clear. Ryan frowned, but nodded. If it was a trap, they had no choice but to spring it. If it was help, they needed it badly. He checked the battery level of the scanner. It was low, maybe 2 hours left before it died. He hoped that would be enough. She reached into her suit and pulled out a strange tool made of bone and crystal, shaped like a dagger, but glowing faintly. She touched it to the beacon, and a soft pulse rippled outward like a wave in water. The red light turned blue. They waited. Nothing happened at first, then a faint hum filled the air, followed by a deep vibration in the ground. Ryan stepped back, instinct telling him danger, and she did the same, standing close to him. Suddenly the snow beneath The beacon cracked and split, revealing a metal hatch. They both stared, unsure what lay beneath. Then slowly together, they descended into the opening. Inside was warmer, not by much, but enough to feel a difference. Metal walls, lined with glowing lines, formed a narrow tunnel. The air smelled of rust and something old, long forgotten. They moved cautiously, Ryan keeping his hand near his belt where a small plasma cutter hung. She led the way, silent but alert, every step echoing faintly in the narrow space. They reached a chamber at the end where a strange spherical device sat in the center, pulsing with energy, ancient yet alive. It came to life as they entered. Lights flashed across its surface, and a soft voice echoed around them, speaking in an old universal dialect. It scanned them, a line of red light moving from their heads to their feet. Then a message appeared on a cracked display screen. Human classified, potential asset. Non-human classified, unpredictable threat. Security mode active. Ryan's heart jumped, and he stepped in front of her, but it was too late. A small turret dropped from the ceiling, aiming straight at her. She didn't move. Instead, she stared at the turret without fear, her eyes glowing slightly. Ryan reacted, instinctively raising his cutter and blasting the base of the turret. It sparked and jerked, but stayed online, aiming at him now. She moved fast, faster than he expected, grabbing a piece of fallen metal and flinging it at the turret with surprising force. It hit the lens just as it fired. The bolt missed his shoulder by an inch and struck the wall behind them. They didn't wait another second. Ryan pulled wires from the back of the device, yanking them loose while she slammed her hand into the core with her glowing blade. Sparks flew, the sphere sputtered, and then finally powered down. The lights fading, silence returned, heavy and thick. They breathed hard, their shoulders nearly touching, neither speaking for a long while. Finally, Ryan looked at her and gave a tired smile. Guess it was a trap after all. She didn't smile, but something in her expression softened. She knelt by the broken device and pulled free a small energy cell, placing it carefully in her pouch. Then she turned to him and nodded. You stopped it for me. He shrugged awkwardly. Yeah. Well, couldn't let you get vaporized. You're the only one who can pronounce half the buttons around here. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering. Then for the first time, her lips curved into something close to a smile, strange and subtle, and gone in a second. They climbed back out into the cold, carrying what they could salvage. The wind was calmer now, and the horizon glowed faintly with evening light. They walked in silence back toward the cave, both of them slower, more tired, but still alive. Inside the cave, she placed the energy cell near the thermal unit, and it hummed to life, stronger than before. Warmth spread slowly into the walls Ryan collapsed against the rock floor, breathing out steam. She sat beside him this time, not on the other side of the cave, but close enough for her shoulder to brush his. He looked at her, wondering what she was thinking. Her eyes were on the sleeping bag again. He waited, thinking she might say something, but she just looked at the firelight dancing across the walls, and then at him. Her voice was softer this time, almost uncertain. Your kind do not see closeness as sacred. Ryan raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Where I come from, she said. Touch's bond is rare. It is not given easily. Was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Well, maybe we're not so different. We just forget sometimes. She didn't reply, but her gaze lingered a moment longer before drifting back to the fire outside. The storm was returning. The snow began to fall again, and in the silence of the cave, two very different souls sat close enough to feel the warmth they now shared, not just from the sleeping bag, but from something else, something new and unspoken, growing in the cold between them. The storm outside howled louder than before, shaking the entrance of the cave and covering it with fresh snow, but inside, the warmth from the energy cell kept them safe for now. Ryan lay awake, staring at the ceiling of rock while she sat beside the heater, silently watching the soft red glow flickering in her eyes. They had shared no more words after their quiet moment by the fire, but something between them had changed. The silence felt less like distance and more like understanding. Hours passed, and when Ryan finally rose, the wind had died down, just enough for them to move again. They packed their few supplies The salvaged energy cell, the rations, and the sleeping bag before stepping out into the snow-covered plains again. This time the cold felt different, no longer biting into their skin as fiercely. Maybe it was the extra heat from the device, or maybe it was the growing fire within their shared purpose they didn't speak. Much as they moved across the land, only exchanged short glances, nods, simple signals that now carried deeper meaning. Scanner in Ryan's hand was almost dead, its display flickering, but he still managed to pick up something faint beneath the ice, a larger structure, maybe more tech or shelter, or maybe a trap like before. Either way, it was worth checking. Ava knelt beside him, brushing her gloved hand over the frozen surface. Her fingers followed invisible lines. She seemed to sense what lay beneath, as if the ice whispered to her in a way no machine could. They found an entrance after clearing the snow and ice away, a round hatch half buried in frost, sealed tight by age and pressure, but still intact. Ava placed her hand on a symbol near the center, and it lit up softly, recognizing her touch. Then, with a deep grinding sound, the hatch opened, revealing a spiral stairway leading down into darkness. They exchanged one last look, then began their descent side by side, their footsteps echoing softly in the shaft. The air inside was still and dry, filled with dust and memories of a place long forgotten. The walls were smooth and metallic, etched with designs that looked ancient. Even to Ava, she paused more than once, studying them. Eyes narrowed in thought. Ryan could tell this place meant something to her. Maybe it was from her people, or from a time before their conflicts. Either way, she treated it with care and caution. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a vast chamber. Glowing with faint blue lights, rows of machines stood silent. Along the walls, strange devices that hummed softly. As they approached, in the center of the room was a platform surrounded by cables and floating panels. Above it hung a large orb pulsing with dim energy. It was not like the trap beacon from before. This felt older, deeper, alive in a different way. As they stepped closer, the orb reacted, lines of light spreading across its surface and forming patterns. Then a voice filled the room, low and layered, like many voices speaking as one. It spoke in broken, universal language, ancient and stuttering, but understandable enough. Welcome, lost ones. Human presence detected. Non-human presence detected. Initiate evaluation protocol. Ryan moved slowly, reaching for his cutter just in case. But Ava stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the orb. With intensity, the light scanned them, both beams sweeping across their bodies and settling on their faces. The orb spoke again, slower now, more focused. Human. Resilient, unpredictable, dangerous. Non-human, disciplined, structured, logical. Both compatible with interface. Requesting link to consciousness. Eva frowned, stepping back slightly, her posture wary. Ryan looked at her, unsure what to do. She shook her head slowly, then pointed to a small console at the side of the platform. He moved toward it, wiping off the dust, and saw a control panel glowing faintly with text he couldn't read. But she leaned over and placed her hand on it again. The system reacted immediately, screens lighting up around them, showing fragments of memories, blueprints, energy maps, even scenes from a long-forgotten war between machines and organics. This place, Ava whispered, is from the first time our worlds met, long before the Alliance, long before the conflict. It remembers everything, and it still judges everything. Ryan studied the images on the screens: battle cities, burning ships falling from orbit, and among them humans and her kind fighting side by side, and then later turning against each other. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. This place was a vault of truth buried for generations. Suddenly, alarms blared, red lights flashing across the chamber. The orb spoke again, voice sharper, louder. Detected anomaly, foreign intelligence present. Security breach detected. Activating defense protocol. Turrets emerged from the walls, and the floor began to shift, splitting open as mechanical limbs rose from below. Ryan grabbed Ava's arm, pulling her back toward the stairs, but she stood firm, staring at the core with a strange calm. She stepped forward, speaking quickly in her own language, and then switched back to universal. We must disable it, not destroy it. It holds knowledge, it holds proof. Ryan nodded. Trusting her instinct, he ran to the console and began pulling wires, checking connections using what little tech training he had to redirect the power flow while Ava moved through the chamber, slicing down one turret with her glowing blade and dodging blasts from another. She moved like a shadow, swift and precise, covering Ryan while he worked. Orb tried to counter shifting power to new systems, but Ryan found the main conduit and jammed his cutter into it, overloading the circuit with a flash of sparks. The machine slowed, then stopped, the lights dimmed, and finally the orb powered down, its last words barely audible. "You are not enemies. You are not the same. You are stronger together." Silence returned, only the soft hum of the remaining energy in the air. Ava stepped back, breathing hard but steady. Ryan slumped against the console, exhausted fingers burned from the heat of the cutter. She walked over and knelt beside him, checking his shoulder where a blast had grazed him earlier. Without a word, she tore a strip from her cloak and wrapped it around the wound. Her touch was gentle, careful, not like before. When she kept her distance, he looked up at her and smiled through the pain. "Guess that answers whether we make a good team." She didn't smile back, but her eyes were softer now, not cold, not guarded. She helped him to his feet, and they slowly made their way back up the stairs, leaving the secrets of the vault behind, but carrying something more valuable than data. When they reached the surface again, the night sky was clear above them, stars blinking like distant fires, and a faint glow in the distance marked where the beacon still burned, calling for rescue. Ava looked at the light, then at Ryan, and for the first time she spoke his name softly, like it meant something more than just identification. "Ryan." He looked at her, surprised, but nodded. "Yeah, that's Mesh." Didn't say more, but she didn't need to. The way she stood closer, the way she handed him the sleeping bag without hesitation, and the way she stayed beside him as they walked back to the cave, all of it said more than words. Something had changed beneath the ice, not just old machines and hidden memories, but something between them, something alive and growing, and soon it would face the light. The night was colder than before, but neither of them seemed to notice. The sky above was clearer. Now stars like scattered fireflies watched over the frozen moon, while distant winds howled across the plains. Ryan and Ava sat by the small fire inside the cave, the sleeping bag folded neatly nearby. Warmth from the energy cell pulsed through the rocks, keeping them alive. But their thoughts were elsewhere. Not on the cold, not on the hunger, but on what waited beyond the mountains. They both knew something had been awakened, something older than either of them. Avava leaned against the wall, quiet and thoughtful, her eyes fixed on the flickering flame. Ryan sat across from her, arms crossed over his chest, shoulders still wrapped in her cloth strip. He watched her silently, wondering what she was thinking. She had changed since they first met, not just in her expressions or movements, but in how she looked at him, not with suspicion anymore, but with something else, something that lingered in the space between them. She finally spoke, her voice low, like she was afraid to disturb the quiet. "The vault was meant to stay hidden for generations. My people buried it long ago, to keep balance, to protect future wars from ancient truths." Ryan tilted his head, trying to follow her. "Meaning you think opening it changed things?" She nodded slowly. "Knowledge changes everything, especially the kind that breaks lies." Ryan looked at the entrance of the cave where the snow had begun to fall again, a soft, gentle drift. He remembered the orb's last words, "Not enemies, not the same, stronger together." He wondered how many times humans and her kind had passed by each other without knowing how close they could be. "We can send the data back," Ryan said. "The beacon is still running. Maybe someone will listen." "They won't," she replied. "Not unless they see proof, not unless someone survives to speak." Ryan sighed, then smiled a little. "Well, then I guess that someone's us." She looked at him for a long moment, and then reached out without a word. She took his hand, her fingers cold, but steady, her grip stronger than it looked, and somehow more comforting than anything he had felt in a long time. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to, and neither did he. The silence between them now was something shared, not empty. The moment broke with a sharp sound outside, a pulse like thunder rolling across the land, followed by another one louder this Ryan jumped to his feet, grabbing the scanner which had flickered back to life with a faint signal. The display flashed red 3 incoming objects. Fast, low, and non-human Ava stood as well, her expression changing instantly from soft to alert. She pulled her blade from its sheath, its glow bright and sharp. "We are not alone anymore," she said. Ryan checked his cutter, low on power but still working. He nodded. They both stepped outside the cave into the cold night. Sky above them danced with faint lights from the north. 3 dark shapes moved quickly across the ice, approaching the ridge, then slowing down and stopping less than 100 meters away. Robotic walkers, tall spindly legs, dark frames, glowing red cores. These were not scouts or searchers, they were hunters sent to destroy, not rescue. Ryan raised his weapon, but Ava stopped him with a look. "Too many, too strong. We cannot face them here." Knew she was right. The cave would be a trap, and the walkers would surround them. They had to draw them away by time for the beacon to complete its signal. He pointed toward the far cliffs where jagged rocks split the valley, and thin ice covered deep crevices. If they led the machines there and timed it right, they could use the terrain to their advantage. She understood his plan without needing words. They moved quickly, Ryan grabbing the beacon stabilizer, and Ava taking the energy cell, both of them running across the snow in silence. The walkers followed, red lights sweeping over the land, scanning, tracking the pair like predators. The chase lasted minutes that felt like hours. Breath turned to mist, legs burned, wind slammed into their faces, but they didn't stop. The cliffs rose in front of them like black teeth against the sky, and they ran straight toward them. Ryan reached the edge first, then turned and saw the machines closing in fast, their legs pounding the ground, their cores glowing brighter now. He shouted even though he didn't have to. Ava stopped and spun her blade, slicing through a narrow support beam on the edge of a natural bridge. Ice cracked, thunder roared. The walkers moved forward, unaware of the trap beneath them. Ryan fired a single shot, not to hit, but to lure the lead walker to more steps, and then the ice gave way. The massive weight of the machines crashed through the thin surface, and they fell into the ravine below. Fire and metal and silence blast threw Ryan off his feet. He landed hard on the snow, groaning pain shooting through his leg. He tried to move, but his body refused. Ava appeared above him, kneeling quickly, her hands checking his injuries. Her face tense but calm, she pulled him up with one arm, slinging him over her shoulder without hesitation. He tried to protest, but she ignored him, her strength surprising as she carried him back toward the cave step by step, snow falling around them like feathers from a broken sky. They reached the cave again, breathless and shaking. She laid him down beside the heater and tore open her pouch, retrieving the last of the rations and water, pressing them into his hands. "You saved me again," he said, voice weak but smiling. This time she did smile, a soft curve of her lips, almost shy, but real. "We saved each other," she whispered. He watched her as she sat down beside him, not across from him this time, but close, shoulder touching shoulder, like it belonged. There they didn't speak for a while, just listened to the wind outside and the soft beep of the beacon. Now stronger, clearer, the signal reaching further. In that moment, Ryan realized something had shifted between them. No longer strangers, no longer enemies. Not even just allies, but something more, something formed in fire and ice, in silence and in danger. A bond not spoken, but deeply understood. He reached into the sleeping bag and pulled it open, patting the space beside him again. She didn't hesitate this time. She slid in beside him, resting her head near his shoulder and closing her eyes. Outside, the stars watched, and the storm passed inside. 2 hearts beat in rhythm, no longer alone. Tomorrow might bring answers or more danger, but for tonight they had survived, and they had done it together. Morning broke across the frozen world, not with sunlight, but with a deep, quiet calm, the kind that follows storms. The sky above was a pale canvas of soft clouds drifting slowly, like they had forgotten the chaos of the night before. Inside the cave, the heater hummed low and steady, casting a gentle warmth over the 2 figures lying close under the sleeping bag. Ryan woke first, his eyes blinking, slowly adjusting to the dim light. He turned slightly and felt the steady rhythm of her breath beside him, peaceful, and even for a moment, he just watched her. The sharp lines of her face now softened by sleep, her arm resting across his chest like a silent reminder of how far they had come from strangers to something more. Something forged through ice and danger and fire. He didn't move, not yet. Instead, he closed his eyes again, just for a few seconds, to hold on to that strange new feeling growing quietly inside him. When Ava stirred, her movements were slow, careful, like someone waking from a long dream. She looked at him, eyes calm but alert, her voice still low and quiet, but more familiar now. "The signal is still active. We should see response soon." Ryan nodded, pushing himself upright, wincing slightly as his leg throbbed from the previous night's fall. She helped him sit fully and checked the bandage without asking, her touch gentle and focused, not out of duty anymore, but something more natural. They shared a few dry rations in silence, then began preparing to leave the cave once more. The beacon blinked steadily, now its rhythm stronger than ever. Ryan checked its transmission range and smiled faintly. The message was finally getting out past the clouds, past the storm, past the moon itself. Someone had to be hearing them. Now someone had to be coming. As they stepped out into the snow again, the sky had cleared, just enough to show distant stars, and beyond that the faint outline of orbiting ships, too far to see clearly, but close enough to make hope feel real. Ava stood still for a moment, head tilted as if listening to the air. Then she turned toward him and nodded. "They heard us." Relief flooded through Ryan, so sudden and powerful that he laughed, a short, breathless sound that surprised even him. Ava didn't laugh, but she watched him with an expression that was almost soft, almost amused in her own quiet way. Waited on the ridge, scanning the skies and readying their gear in case the wrong kind of ship arrived first. But when the craft finally descended through the clouds, it came not with weapons, but with light. The vessel was sleek and marked with both human and alien symbols, a sign of something more than rescue, a sign of something finally starting to change. The ship landed gently on the snow, and the ramp lowered, slowly revealing a mixed crew, humans and aliens, working side by side, their faces showing surprise at the two survivors waiting below the rescue team. Moved forward, scanning Ryan and Ava for injuries, weapons, or threats, but stopped when the two stood shoulder to shoulder without fear. Commanding officer, a human woman with tired eyes and a curious look, stepped forward, her voice careful but clear. "You made contact. You activated the old vault." Why? Ryan exchanged a glance with Ava before answering. "We didn't plan to. We just survived together, and it led us there. It showed us something. It showed us truth that was hidden and forgotten." Ava spoke next, her tone calm and even but strong. "We found a record of the past, both of our peoples working together. Before the division, before the war, the vault tried to protect it, but it failed. Now the truth is free again." Officer looked between them, her face unreadable. Then slowly she nodded. "The data from the beacon has been received already. Command is reviewing it. This changes everything." They were taken aboard the ship, given warmth, proper food, and medical attention, but even with safety around them, they stayed close, never more than a few steps apart. Something about that long, cold journey had reshaped them, not just as individuals, but as a unitas. The ship rose from the frozen moon and entered orbit. Ryan sat by the viewport watching stars glide past while Ava stood beside him, silent for a long time. Then finally she broke the silence with words that were not mechanical, not guarded, but almost playful. "Next time, human, you bring 2 sleeping bags." Ryan turned toward her with a smile. "Yeah, next time I will, maybe even a blanket." She gave him a look that said nothing and everything at once, and then slowly sat down beside him. Their shoulders touched again, but this time there was no hesitation, no tension, just the comfort of knowing the fight was over and something new had begun. They arrived at the orbital station days later, where officials waited with questions, eyes full of suspicion and curiosity. They were separated briefly, debriefed, scanned, questioned, but always returned to the same room after every session, always drawn back to the only person who truly understood what they had gone through, the Council reviewed the data, the images from the vault, the voice of the ancient machine, the scans of the broken world, and the mixed crew began to whisper among themselves, not of fear this time, but of change, of possibility, of unity. Soon, a decision was made. A new expedition would be launched, a joint mission of humans and her people together, returning to the moon, not for war, not for conquest, but to study, to learn, and to remember. Ava was offered a place back among her kind, but she refused without hesitation. Instead, she stepped into the human ship beside Ryan and said simply, "I go where the truth lives." Ryan didn't say anything, just handed her a fresh sleeping bag with a small grin, and they walked side by side into the future. Their story spread not as a legend or a fairy tale, but as fact recorded in files and logs, in the quiet talks of soldiers and pilots, in the soft voices of those who had lost hope and now found it again. Some called it luck, others called it fate, but those who knew them said it was something simpler, two survivors who chose trust over fear and fire over silence, and in doing so changed more than they ever imagined. Far from the frozen moon, beneath distant stars, two figures sat close, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as something entirely new, something built not from history, but from the choice to see each other clearly and walk forward together. The journey had begun with only one sleeping bag, but it ended with something far greater, something they could both finally call home. The end.